Welcome to Nerd Vibes. I'm your host, Ray, aka Armed Dark Mamba. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Nerd Vibes, episode 8. And I had so much fun on the last episode that I decided we were going to do another mixed bag this week. Instead of doing just anime or just comics, we're going to do anime and some other things in the nerd space that I haven't got to talk about just yet. So outside of anime and comics, we're going to be talking about Avatar. We're going to be talking about the live action because I wanted to talk about that. I'm pretty excited for it, but I'll save some more of my takes for that a little bit later. I also watched another show on Netflix that is not anime or comic. It might have a comic, I'm not sure. But if it does have a comic, I've never read it. But I watched another show on Netflix that I want to talk about. And it just finished up. Super quick watch. It was really fun. So we'll talk about that later. And then we're going to talk about Solo Leveling, episodes 3 and 4. At the time of recording this, February 1st, I have seen up to episode 4 of Solo Leveling. So we're going to be talking about those 2 episodes in a minute. But first, I want to get to some hot topics. The first thing I want to talk about is going to be Monsters. It was the one-shot anime on Netflix done about Ryuma, the sword god, Zoro's distant relative. Okay. Just my reactions, my thoughts. It was good, not great, is what I'll say. The animation on it was more different, was different than I thought it would be, to be honest. So I found myself a little bit out of sorts when I first started watching it, but then once we got into it, I really got used to the animation, and then it started to look beautiful. It was a little dull in certain aspects, but yeah, the animation was good. Now the story, it definitely caught me off guard. The locale of where the story took place. It took place in kind of like this old westerny town. Didn't expect that kind of setting in that there to be there. I didn't expect the appearance of Ryuma to be what it was. He was like Zoro in a way that he was kind of clumsy and kind of putting on like a front, so to speak, being not as good as he was in terms of his swordsmanship. So there was that. And then just the plot was very predictable. I thought, some things happened in that middle section there that I just found myself a little confused by, but then by the end of the episode, it was cleared up. I just want to say that also Monster was only a 25-minute one shot. So it wasn't very long, so they didn't put too much lore or anything into it. But the part that I found myself wrestling over, whether I was disappointed or not, was the actual slaying of the dragon. I thought it was going to be more extravagant, more, I don't know what I thought, to be honest. I thought it would be better than it was. And spoiler alert for Monsters. But if you watch One Piece, you know that Ryuma killed the dragon. It's obvious. But all he did was slice the head off. One slice. I mean, it was impressive. It was an impressive move for sure, but it just was lacking in excitement and any type of lead up or anything like that. It just kind of happened, and you were just left with, at least I was left with, that was it. That was it for this move. So it was a little disappointing, but overall, like I said, it was good, not great. I wish it was better, but I think Oda was kind of playing a joke about the myths and the legends that go on in One Piece. It's not always what you think or what you think it is when you're talking about the rumor. It could be a rumor. You know, myths often tend to get exaggerated and expanded upon, and you know, you're so far from the truth at some point that it's not nearly as what it was, you know. So I think there was a case of that happening there with Ryuma. Yes, he did slay a dragon, but I think the legend became bigger than the actual feat was. And so, you know, it, like I said, it left me kind of cold, but again, I understood it. So it was good, not great. All right. After our discussion about monsters, I do want to talk about where we are as a One Piece community right now, because on the last episode, we talked about Bonnie, the controversy surrounding Bonnie and her age versus how she's being sexualized and things of that nature. But on this most recent episode that we watched, there was a scene where her and Chopper had to get changed. They used a changing machine that was inside of Egghead. It was all smoke and stuff. You couldn't see anything at all. They took the clothes, and then she came out in her Punk Hazard clothing, which I like. The Punk Hazard fits this arc. I like Luffy's fit. I like Chopper's fit. Jinbei wearing the Hawaiian t-shirt is on brand for Jinbei. And so, but Bonnie, again, she was fully covered up top, but the bottom was a little cheeky. So there's that. But I definitely don't hear the chatter as much this time around as we did as much as we did on the last episode, where we, you know, the anime community was up in arms. I think it's, again, like I said, kind of accepted at this point. There was the initial shock, which we talked about on the last pod, where, you know, everyone was going to be a little bit upset about the sexualization once they found out the actual age of Jewelry Bonnie. But I said it's a cultural thing. This is just what the media presented. It is what it is. And here we are 2 weeks later, and you don't really hear the same kind of noise about what happened. So I think it was safe to say that it was fine, you know. But I'm glad as a community we were able to recognize it, talk about it, and move on, you know, and continue loving the medium and the show that we enjoy. I'm glad that we were able to do that. I now want to talk about some video games in the anime and comic book space. First one I'm excited about. One I'm a little disappointed by initially, by my first impressions. And the first one is going to be Dragon Ball Z Sparkling Zero, something like that. I forget the name of these games, to be honest. But so it's the newest Dragon Ball Z game, no release date. But they just came out with a trailer for it with Goku and Vegeta fighting in different stages, in different arcs of Dragon Ball. You know, obviously the initial meeting of Goku and Vegeta on planet Earth. They're in Saiyan Saga. There's scenes from the Frieza saga. There's also scenes from the Majin Buu saga where they, you know, decide to have their fight. Goku does Super Saiyan 3, Majin, Vegeta. So it's very hype. All right, it's very hype. This game is an extension from the Budokai Tenkaichi line of games that I grew up with playing. So I'm very excited about that. I'm really, really excited about the roster. I know I keep saying how excited I am, but this is how excited I am about this game. I'm that excited. A roster of 164 characters. You have your choice of absolutely any characters. Okay. Some of my favorite characters are going to be on there. The Ginyu Force. Ridiculous team, but I love them in video games. They're so funny. all the forms of Frieza, Zarbon. I'm going deep right now. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have the Red Ribbon Army guys. Have to, right? The androids. Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. My favorite Gohan. Team Gohan, Super Saiyan 2. My favorite version of Gohan. Going to be in that game. You're going to have Beast Gohan, his latest form, in that game. Hopefully. That's more of a hope than confirmed. But 164 spots, you can't give one to Beast Gohan? Come on. So I'm looking forward to these games. Okay, there's no release date. It's just a little trailer, but the trailer was enough for me to mention it here with you guys. I will be playing that game over on my Twitch at some point. Twitch.tv/Rockmamba. Shameless plug, but whatever. And then the game that I'm initially disappointed with, okay, which is Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. I haven't played it. I do want to say I have not played it. Okay. So this is just strictly me watching streams, watching reviews on YouTube or whatever it is, whatever information I can get, reading articles. But here are some of my thoughts about this game so far. Okay. The first thing I want to talk about with this game has nothing to do with any type of storyline, plot points, anything like that. The number one thing that is keeping me away from this game is the visual clutter on the game. Okay. The visual clutter. There's so much. I was watching some streams, I don't really know who it was that were playing it. They get early access, right? I'm watching some streams and it's just colors everywhere. Okay. Explosions left and right, in the background. And then every time you're hitting an enemy with your bullets or whatever your projectile is, you're getting damage counters. So every time that's a hit, if you're thinking about some sort of whatever high-powered automatic weapon, right? How many times that's going to be hitting your enemy, you're getting all those damage counters up in the corner. That's so much visual clutter for me, and I just can't with the visual clutter. It's too much. It's too much, unfortunately. The other thing about this game is the enemies are too repetitive from what I saw. They're pretty much, you land in an area, the enemies all look the same outside of the Justice League characters. You have your different, enemy structures and stuff, enemies that do different things, but they all look the same. It's pretty much the same battle plans and stuff like that. The gameplay looked really repetitive to me. Haven't played it. Again, I want to say that I haven't played it. The other thing, I saw some of the deaths of certain Justice League members. 2 in particular that bothered me. Green Lantern, because obviously, right? Obviously, one of my favorite characters. It wasn't Hal Jordan, but just the way that was done, it didn't. Wasn't a fan. Wasn't a fan of it. No, I'm just gonna be. I'm not a fan of the concept of the Suicide Squad being able to kill the Justice League in general. Don't think it's possible. Don't think it's realistic. Think it's kind of dumb for a game, but I digress. And then the other one that fans were really upset with was how Batman got dispatched. People were not happy with that being the way Batman was taken care of. They don't think that it did the character justice, and they don't think they did the character justice. And they also don't think that the way in which it was handled was great. So those are some of the things that the fans had a problem with. I also personally want to say I don't think that this game should be a live service game. I think that in general, the game should be a standalone, singular story game that gets DLC, not necessarily live service updates, because I played a superhero game that was live service updates in the Avengers. I was one of the few people that played that game. And as a live service game, it just didn't work. But as a standalone, the story was fun. The gameplay got repetitive, yes, but you could switch it up with the different Avengers that you used. So it was a different gameplay experience from time to time. But they took forever to update the character list, the character roster, to update the available missions. The takeovers and stuff that they had in that game was pretty cool. So there is hope for the Justice League game. The Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League game in terms of that. Some of the updates coming, but the number one thing that's going to keep me away from the game is 100% the visual clutter, because it's just so much. Again, so much. But and the fact that it's a live service game, because again, I think if it was standalone, it could have been great. But everybody wants to make their games live service with microtransactions and things like that, and I think it's to the detriment of the overall quality of the game. So, unfortunate that comic book games strike out again. But we're going to take a break. And then coming up next, we have our discussion about Avatar: The Last Airbender, the live action, where I'm at with it, how excited, not excited, how I'm looking at it, and a certain controversy that's been brewing among the fandom. And it's a bit of a debate. So stick around for that. See you on the other side of this break where we talk about Avatar. All right, we are back, and we're going to start our discussion about Avatar: The Last Airbender, the live action. Okay, if you're unfamiliar with Avatar: The Last Airbender, the live action, it is based on Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated series, one of the greatest animated series of all time. The live action is what we're going to be talking about, so nothing really from the animated series. The live action premieres February 22nd on Netflix. So I wanted to talk about it here before the premiere, so that I can get going and give you guys my initial thoughts and stuff. But we are going to talk about it in the future on the podcast, especially because if they drop all the episodes, I'm going to watch it and we're going to talk about it. Now, before recording this, I just watched both of the trailers that have dropped from it. And I do want to talk about some things that I'm excited for in this live action, and where my excitement level is for this. Now, as far as my excitement level goes, I'm optimistically excited. I am hopeful that it's going to be good. And like I said, I watched both of the trailers before recording this. I'm just familiarizing myself with all the different characters and everything like that. A couple people I wanted to touch on in the trailers that I saw. Okay. Sokka looks good. Katara looks good. So our team Avatar looks solid. Okay. Kyoshi Warriors, who are going to be in season 1, apparently, they look very good. Okay. Their makeup, their garb, everything looks very accurate to what we saw in the animated series, which is amazing. One that I wanted to touch on, which when I saw it was just chef's kiss. The perfect casting was Uncle Iroh. He's cast by Paul Sun Hyung Lee. I hope I said that right. Who plays the father in another show that's on Netflix, Kim's Convenience. This guy in Kim's Convenience was so funny, so electric as an actor. I'm so glad that he's going to play Iroh. When I saw him in the trailers, he looked just like Iroh. It was uncanny. Yeah, so when I saw him in the trailer, I was just like, that is Uncle Iroh for sure. It just makes the most sense. That was the perfect casting for him. And a lot of the cast was perfectly cast in terms of their look and everything like that. The Prince Zuko, we'll see when the show comes out, but from the trailers, it didn't look that great. That's the only character gripe I have. Aang looks really good. Katara with Sokka, we already talked about. Some of the potential problems I see coming from this show. The Appa and Momo scenes, the CGI on them could be an issue. Yeah, so the CGI for Appa and Momo definitely could be an issue that I see. It could get choppy there with the quality of the CGI on those two characters in particular. And then some of the bending effects may get a little wonky depending on the CGI. But, those are the real issues I see that could be plaguing this show. Other than that, it looks really good according to the trailer. So, like I said, I'm optimistically excited. Now, the big thing that brought me to talk about this show before it premiered was there's a huge conversation going on with the fandom having to do with the change that they're making to Sokka's character. Okay, a little bit of backstory on the character of Sokka. In the animated series, Sokka is a 12, 13, 14-year-old boy who has a viewpoint coming from I believe he's in the Southern Water Tribe, or I want to say the Southern Water Tribe. It's one of the water, either the Southern or the Northern Water Tribe. I know the Avatar fans are going to kill me for that, but off the top of my head, I can't remember which one it is, but he's from one of those water tribes. Okay. And he comes from the belief that women belong in the kitchen. Women are better at household things like sewing and, doing the chores and dishes and stereotypical woman tasks. Okay. Whereas on the other side of that, he believes that men are better hunters, better warriors, better at stereotypical male things that would be done in those times. So hunting, warriors, all those things, right? And over the course of the show, Sokka is continuously reminded that there are females in the show who are just as good as him in what he thinks men are supposed to be good at, and in turn are also better than him at things that women aren't supposed to be better than men at. So, case in point are the Kyoshi warriors that we meet in the animated series. They get Team Avatar, containing Avatar, Aang, Katara, and Sokka at the time. They get ambushed by the Kyoshi warriors, and in the animated series, once they wake up and they're tied to a post, Sokka exclaims, "Oh, get to the women," because all the Kyoshi warriors are women. He exclaims to the women, "Go get the men who ambushed us." They respond, "There were no men. We are the Kyoshi warriors. We're just women." And then he says, "Oh, well, you wouldn't have done anything if you didn't ambush us." Right? So just sexism at its finest. Okay. There are other instances where he tells Katara she's better at sewing and he's better at being a warrior, where in this situation, Katara is the better combatant because she's a waterbender and she's a very skilled waterbender. Okay. So it is very important for Sokka's character that he starts out with this viewpoint of how he views women, his worldview about his place in the world as a man. And when he goes on this journey with Avatar Aang and Team Avatar, he starts to see that his worldview is being challenged constantly by his sister, by the various companions that they meet across, their adventure, by Toph, who is a earthbender who is blind. He initially doubts her and has his feelings on her because of her disability, being blind, and she is constantly overcoming that disability. So that's another part of Sokka's character arc that I hope they don't take out, but it is confirmed they're taking out the sexism part. And so I say all that to say, it's very important that they keep Sokka being sexist in this live action adaptation, because that is a huge, huge part of his character development. And I don't believe he becomes the character that he becomes later on in the series if he doesn't go through what he goes through. So Sokka being humbled so many times in so many different ways by the Kyoshi warriors, in terms of showing him how much of a gap there is between them as warriors and him as warrior, and what he thinks he is as a warrior. That's one way he gets humbled, by being a warrior. Okay. The next time, and one of the more consistent times he gets humbled, is by Toph, who again is blind, and she consistently overcomes things that she is perceived not to be able to do by Sokka and others in the show. And it's not just Sokka who shows sexism and towards any of these characters. There is a storyline where Katara goes to the opposing water tribe that she's from to seek a master to show her how to waterbend. And the master in this village says, in our village, women are not allowed to waterbend. And that is a huge, huge storyline in the animated series for Katara in particular, because it's showing her progression as a waterbender to this gentleman, to this elder in this village. And she has to prove her worth as a female waterbender to get this master to respect her and to ultimately teach her. And they ultimately get into a fight. She loses, and then there's some sentimental stuff that happens. But the overall basis is that there is some sexism there, and that Katara has to overcome that as her character. So if they're taking out or severely tamping down the amount of sexism that these characters have to face, it is definitely taking away character development from Katara for that particular situation where she experiences sexism directly, and then all the offhand comments of sexism that she gets from her own brother, Sokka. And that's huge, huge part of his character that's just being completely toned down or dismissed. And I think that that's not really a good thing, because I think if they were able to put it into a kids show in the mid 2000s or whatever, and kids were able to understand it and see and visualize and see the change in a character then, because I watched the show when it was coming out. So I was able to process it and understand it and get what he was doing was wrong, and how it was showing that women are just as capable as men in the things that Sokka thought they were deficient in, and I was able to understand when I was a kid. So I don't understand why the creators felt the need to either dismiss this character trait from Sokka initially, or to completely tone it down, because I feel like the message that is carried throughout the story, specifically with Sokka and the sexism, is one that's very important to be told. And I feel like they're missing the boat on not telling that particular part of his character journey. And I'm on the side of let Sokka be sexist so that he can he can learn and the audience can learn through him. But the creators went a different direction, apparently. So we're not necessarily going to get that. And I think it's a huge mistake. But next thing we're going to talk about after this break, Solo Leveling, episodes 3 and 4. And for this conversation, I did a deep dive with the material in my hand as I watched episodes to see exactly what they changed. Was it a good change? Was it a bad change? What they missed? And where are we going from here? So on the other side of this break, Solo Leveling, episodes 3 and 4 review. All right, we're back. Now, let's talk about Solo Leveling, the anime that is taking the world by storm. It is super popular. Everybody loves it. I haven't seen anyone say any bad things about it. So I love it. So we're going to keep covering it here on the podcast. And this time I wanted to take more of a deep dive analytical approach to the episodes, tell you what's in the episodes, what we're missing, the context, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to start with episode 3, which is in episode 3, he wakes up in the hospital. This is after the events of episode 1 and 2, where they do the double dungeon. And at the end of episode 2, he ultimately gets killed by the statues, gets taken out. And right at the end of episode 2, he gets the prompt that says, your heart's about to stop in 0.2 seconds. Will you accept this quest, or whatever it says? So right at the start, episode 3, we get Jinwoo waking up in his bed. He notices that his arms and his legs are back, whereas at the end of episode 2, you remember he had his legs cut off, or one of his legs cut off, one of his arms cut off. So he wakes up, notices that. First thing he notices, obviously. In the manhwa, he doesn't notice, at least he doesn't acknowledge in the manhwa until after the conversation he has with the 2 gentlemen in the suit that come from the Monster Hunters Association to question him about the double dungeon. So a little bit of a difference there, not too much, just a slight difference in terms of the noticing and everything like that. Another thing that I noticed was that in the conversation between him and his sister, when his sister came to visit him in the hospital, right after the Hunters Association guys left, they added some dialogue, like various bits and pieces of dialogue to the anime version to add context to the sibling relationship between Jinwoo and his sister. You know, so there was a lot more affection shown from his sister, a lot more concern shown from his sister. And then pretty much it goes panel for panel after that. Now, the big change, okay, or not a big change, but it's a big sequence from 8 minutes and 14 seconds in the anime to about 10 minutes in the anime, if you're looking at the, minutes bar or whatever. So that whole situation right there, I believe it's the 2 guys who were visiting him in the hospital driving in the car. And then it's 2 other hunters from an opposing guild talking about awakened heroes and things like that. So that whole scene right there was added to the anime. Okay, it was added to the anime. It's nowhere in the manga or in the manhwa. My bad. I looked. Okay, it's not in there. So they added that to add some more context to what's going on with our main character Jinwoo. All right. So after that, added scenes. There is the scene where we see the penalty, where he's starting to get the penalty for not completing his daily tasks. That's something else. Not going to really explain that. But he gets the daily task if he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, goes to the penalty. So he goes to the penalty zone. That scene in that one added just a couple of hospital scenes where the hospital staff notices that he's gone. So they're, starting to look for him while he's in the penalty zone because he has to be in there for 4 hours. Also, as he is in the penalty zone, so that we get a few extra scenes of the hospital staff looking for him, and then we also get, a few extra scenes of him running from the monster that's in the penalty zone. Whereas in the manhwa, he goes in the penalty zone. It shows the amount of time he has to survive, and then the next time, it's like literally like one page, and then he's out. Whereas in the anime, it just expanded that. So as we're in the anime, it expanded that scene to accommodate for him, being there. So, and give a little bit more context of like how long he was actually there. And then this part that I found interesting that they added it to the anime that was not in the manhwa was Johi Lee, the healer in episode 1 and 2 that was in the double dungeon with him, comes to visit him in the hospital while he's working out and stuff. So she sees him working out. In the manhwa, she goes to visit him, and she doesn't visit him. It's just the nurses that you see in the scene in the anime just talking about it without her being there. But in the anime, she's there and she overhears them talking. And then it goes into that scene about, what he's doing and all that. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about in episode 3 that was different than manhwa was at the end of episode 3, he goes into the instance dungeon that he uses the key to get into. And there's a whole fight sequence with him versus the goblins in the initial, when he initially gets into the dungeon. That doesn't happen in manhwa, and the reason it does happen is because you see flashbacks in the earlier episodes, and in the manhwa he makes mention of how before he wasn't even able to fight goblins. So for the anime, they added that context to show before he moved on to the next stage of magical beasts that he's going to be fighting, that he can now take out these simple monsters that he wasn't able to take out in the previous 2 episodes based on his stat increases and his, increases that he got and buffs that he got from his quests and stuff like that. So that's what that is to show. So that is what is there to show his power increase before we get to episode 4 and what we end episode 3 with, which is him in an encounter with a steel-jawed red wolf lichen or something like that. So that was episode 3. So a lot of changes in episode 3 relative to the manhwa, but nothing really groundbreaking. They just reordered some things, and they had the Johi visiting him scene, and then the big one that they added was the Hero Association guys talking and communicating about Jinwoo, where that didn't really happen in the manhwa right now. But episode 4 was really good. Episode 4 was more action-packed and more closely related to the manhwa, but I do want to talk about that in particular because that episode was gas. All right, now when it comes to episode 4 of Solo Leveling, we have a much closer one-to-one in terms of what was in the manhwa versus what was in episode 4. The only things I found discrepancies with was there's a shorter mid-dungeon fight scene where he's fighting, in the anime, he's fighting the lichens, and then he goes after he fights the whole room of lichens. By the way, in the manhwa, it seemed like there was way more lichens, and he got way more experience points, way more level ups in that scene than in the anime. But after he fights them, he does fight a series of other magical beasts in there. It was briefly touched on in the anime, but, there seemed to be more encounters that were alluded to in the manhwa. Slight difference, not really that big of a deal. And then they also added scenes about what was going on outside of the dungeon, whereas in the manhwa, they never even talked about it really until he got out of the instance dungeon. But they were talking about how Juhi got called to help out with a random group of other hunters because there was a gate that opened up in the middle of the city and they needed hunters to go and deal with that gate immediately. She was still traumatized, so she didn't go on the initial call. And so this was their second time trying to get her out there because she is a B-ranked hunter, which we went over the ranking system in the last episode. But, so she's kind of on the higher tier of healers. So they needed her because it was a short notice gate that opened up like right there. So they touched on that in the anime, whereas in the manhwa, they didn't touch on it. And then they pretty much went panel for panel in terms of what was in the anime versus what was in the manhwa. They did switch up some dialogue in some places, but nothing too groundbreaking. I feel like in the manhwa, the boss battle versus the blue venom snake was a little bit more intense in the part of Jinwoo in terms of his emotional turmoil he was going through at the time. I think the anime kind of tampered down his lusting for power in that moment because in the manhwa, he specifically states that he wants more power. He wants to be stronger. He wants to do more. And he says, power, power, power. We got volume 2 right here. Checking right now. Hold on. Let me check. Yeah, so there's a whole scene right here where he's talking about to himself about how the people with more power can do more things. And because he was so weak, he was always subjected to people with more power and had to deal with that as the weakest hunter. And so now he starts craving in this moment more power. And he specifically says power, power. He says the word power 2, 3, 4 times. Okay. And he's talking about when he was confronted by power, when he was in that dungeon and he felt powerless to those deities in the dungeon that he was in episodes 1 and 2, that how he was craving for that type of power to where he didn't have to bend down or bend his will to anyone else. So I thought that was a slight change that just made the encounter with the boss of that dungeon a little less emotional for our main character. Whereas I think if they would have put that internal dialogue that he had with the amount of intensity that it was in the manhwa with, I feel like it would have been a more robust and emotionally gripping scene than it was. But don't get me wrong, it was cool. The design on the snake was really, really cool. They did a great job animating the snake. The fight was amazing, especially when he grabs onto the snake towards the end and starts squeezing the snake. The snake goes crazy and, crushes him through a pillar, and you get his head snapping back, and then he comes back, blood dripping down his face. It's a very intense scene as he goes to squeeze the snake to death. It was an amazing scene. They did that way better in the anime than they did in the manhwa. In manhwa, it's just one panel, and you don't fully grasp what he did. So as I was, watching and reading together, you get to see the expanded context of that scene, and it makes that particular part, the ending part of that fight, is definitely more intense in the anime than it is in the manhwa for sure. And then after that, you do have some other flashback stuff that happens in the manhwa that's not necessarily important, but I wish it would have been there. And then everything else afterwards, where he comes out of the dungeon, the soldier stops him, takes him to where the other hunters are having a hard time. He throws his broken sword, breaks the defenses of the magical beast. The hunters that are gathered there defeat the beast, and then it goes on. The episode ends. Okay, so episode 4 was really good, pretty much 1-to-1. Like I said, some switch dialogue and some things that they missed that could have just made the moment a little bit more intense. But overall, I think the episode was great. Animation has been top tier all 4 episodes, and I don't really see it stopping, to be honest. I'm very, very happy with what they have done with the anime adapting the manhwa right now. It looks great. There's not too many changes, and the changes that they have made for the most part have been really, really good in terms of moving the story along, touching on some things that are happening outside of what Jinwoo is doing, because in the manhwa it's very, very focused on what he's doing and not necessarily what's going on outside of his realm. So the anime is doing a great job filling in those gaps. But yeah, this anime is top tier right now. It's so good. It's so good. And so many people love it. And I'm just glad that I started reading it before the anime came out, because this is the first anime that I've read the source material before seeing the anime, and it being really, really good. And I can find these little things. So this analytical, going back and watching the episodes from the vantage point of having the actual physical copy in my hand and going through and seeing, hey, this is different. This is added. It added a different level of fun to the anime watching experience. So we're going to be doing that going forward, specifically with Solo Leveling. But as a new anime come out, we're going to be getting the mangas for those. Like I said, I got Chainsaw Man, I got Hell's Paradise back there as well. So I need to catch up on those so that when the season 2 of those shows come out, we can analyze them and go bar for bar, panel for panel, and see how they stack up to the source material. But yeah, that's episode 4. And next, after this break, we are going to talk about the mystery show that I have watched on Netflix that I want to talk about. It's a mystery. You guys will never guess what show it is, but it's a good one. And it's short, quick, to the point, has some great, great moments. But we're going to talk about it after this break. All right, so you may be asking yourselves, what is this mystery show that you watched on Netflix? Not anime, not comics, but wanted to talk, liked it enough to bring it to the pod. And it's going to be the Masters of the Universe series. He-Man. Okay? It's a continuation of the 1980s He-Man animated TV show. Okay? All right. Now, Masters of the Universe is a continuation of the 1980s show. But this one takes a drastically different turn than the 1980s show, which focused primarily on the battles between He-Man and Skeletor. This one decided to take He-Man and Skeletor basically out of the story and focus the spotlight on our strong female characters, in the He-Man replacement being the woman at arms Teela, which is also his love interest going forward. And taking the place of Skeletor was the character of Evil Lyn. So people who are familiar with the He-Man series will know these characters. So that was, I think, an amazing move, because it brings a whole new audience into the He-Man universe. It centers a strong female lead, which is good for the modern times. And it puts He-Man in the position of being a more vulnerable character, because he spends the majority of the season either on the sidelines, in his weaker mortal Prince Adam form, while Tila is the one who goes around Eternia trying to figure out what's going on, what's happening, all this stuff. So Masters of the Universe Revelation is broken into 2 parts. So part 1 was released in July 2021. That's when I first watched it. Part 2 is released in November of 2021. And both of those parts have 5 episodes. So that's why I said this is a quick watch. Okay, you go in, part 1, 5 episodes, boom. Part 2, 5 episodes, boom. Now, let's talk about part 1. Part 2, still focused on secondary characters, but Tila and Evil Lyn took the majority of the spotlight in the second part, with their battle over magic and trying to bring back Eternia's whole situation hinged on their battle, because He-Man and Skeletor get their powers from magic. And at this point, Skeletor was depowered, hiding Evil, and He-Man was depowered because there was magic in Eternia. So throughout this part 1 and part 2, mostly part 2, Tila starts to find her actual roots, where she's from, the trauma that she holds, basically against her father, Man at Arms, the current King Randor. She finds out that her mother was the sorceress of Castle Grayskull, and that's why she was never around, because she was not allowed to leave the castle. So she had a lot of trauma from her mother not being around. So once she finds this out, she starts realizing her magical background, and it's a whole character arc for Tila and her parentage and lineage and all that kind of stuff. And then the other side, you have Evil Lyn, who is dabbling with still being evil, trying to gain as much power as she can. At this point, Tila is trying to solve the mystery of where all the magic went and all that kind of stuff, as well as fight Evil Lyn, who's doing this, unbeknownst to her. Skeletor is still lurking in the background. And then at the end of part 2, you get, your Skeletor and He-Man fight and all that kind of stuff. You do get quick references of He-Man and Skeletor in the beginning of part 2 as well, but very short-lived, because Tila and Evil Lyn very much take the spotlight in all of these iterations of He-Man. So after part 1 and part 2, the reason we're talking about it is because the newest season, He-Man Revolution, I believe it's called, just premiered on Netflix. I want to say a couple days ago in January. So I just watched that. It's a quick 5 episodes, in and out. It is, so Masters of the Universe Revolution. Okay, I'm going to be quick down on this one where it's different. Okay, Tila is a focus, but it's a secondary focus to the He-Man storyline. And I'm going to research for this because I thought the Tila storyline, being the front-facing character, being the main character, so to speak. And in my research for this for this podcast episode, I found that there was a lot of backlash apparently to portrayal of He-Man to Tila in the Revelations part, so part 1 and part 2. So they made the change to make this more He-Man focused season, which, I mean, to me, He-Man is not that interesting of a character. I'm way more interested in the other characters have been. Man at Arms has always been like a really cool character to me, for He-Man, but that's just me. So back to the formula of, He-Man versus Skeletor, with them setting up He-Man versus Skeletor, with Skeletor having something above him. So that it sets up future seasons, that being Hordak. Not going to go into who Hordak is, and then the subplot of the season is magic versus technology. So Skeletor siding on the technological side, and obviously we have He-Man, who still gets his power from magic, which is from Grayskull, Tila, all that kind of stuff. Tila has been taken over as the source of Castle Grayskull from her mother, and the purpose of Tila in the situation is, in this season, is to gather up the power of Eternia so that she can rebuild Pretoria, I believe it's called, which is basically the heavenly realm of Eternia. But she needs all 3 of the magic types, which is the Castle Grayskull one, the snake magic, and then the chaos, I guess, is what it's called. So it's all the magic together from them, and then recreate Eternia so that the honored spirits can have a place to rest and have their reward. When we saw Eternia in, I believe it is part 2 of Revelation. So at the end, Evil Lyn destroys Eternia, and we see Evil Lyn here, in helping one of the deities recover because he's about to die. But she's repenting for the destruction of Eternia, and that's she ends up helping Tila in this to acquire all this magic train and to actually to help rebuild Eternia. But I thought these 15 episodes were really good, high quality episodes. The action scenes were amazing. Story in part 1, part 2 was really good. It kind of faltered for me. It's part 3 or second season, I want to portray it. It fell off a little bit because it was He-Man focused, and I'm more interested in Teela's character and her character arc, her journey, especially with the different magics that she just acquired in this season. So I've never been a He-Man guy. When she acquired the snake magic, it was so cool. It came with a transformation where she had like this cobra garb on top of her. It looked cool. The magic she was using was really cool. We didn't get to see her use the chaos magic that Skeletor had been using the whole series so far. She got that at the end and only used it to combine with the other two magic she had to recreate Paternia. So we didn't see that, but the snake magic she was using it was really, really cool. The ending was open-ended. So there is room to create other stories from this. I would personally like more world building based on the end of the season. We had Prince Adam, who is now King Adam. He destroyed the monarchy and basically made them a democracy, democratized Eternia, which is awesome. We have the side characters, Andrea, I believe her name is, who was the arms for Prince Adam. She's an in-ear friend of Sokka. All she is a woman of color, the only woman of color in the entire series with any relevance. So at the end of the season of Revolution, she is, after the monarchy's been broken, they democratized, she has stated that she wants to run for representative of Eternia, basically, the president of Eternia, basically. And I want to see more of that. I want to see world building. I want to see where it goes, that particular storyline. I want to see where the storyline of He-Man and Teela / Prince Adam / He-Man / Teela, where that goes. So I want to see where Prince Adam / He-Man and Teela, I want to see that relationship goes going forward, because at the end, it is a little bit cliffhanger. We have the Skeletor reveal again, and I think that we look at and upon like what's going to happen with that character. I just think that they have a lot of different threads that they can pull on to create better stories that don't necessarily have to directly deal with He-Man or Skeletor, and it's still be storytelling. So I'm hoping that this series gets more series, more the whole other things that will stick, and I believe that there's some factions going on of He-Man Masters of the Universe that I don't even know about. And I'm very excited. But like I said, quick 15 episode series. It's nice, good animation, good fights, pretty good storylines. I would say Masters of the Universe was a very, very fun, very cool watch, and I would recommend it to anyone. But you are a fan. Thank you for listening to Nerd Vibes. We will see you guys next week.
It's a vibe.